Hey, what's going on, guys? How we doing? I got an awesome question from James yesterday, and James asked, "Hello, Chris. Thanks for the videos. I've been doing what you recommended regarding fermented foods and added plain Greek yogurt and kefir. I recently read that milk and milk products contain estrogen due to the fact that cows remain pregnant for so long. At 42, I'm trying to naturally increase my testosterone and do not need any extra estrogen." Great question, James. It's actually so important that we maintain hormonal health, because hormones aren't just there to help us have sex. They're there to help us to feel good. They're there to keep us in balance. And pretty much every function in your body is affected by hormones. I recently had an experience with this when I got put on prednisone, and I didn't come off of it slowly enough. When you take prednisone, they put you on a certain dose, and you're supposed to titrate down. And I didn't come off slowly enough, and that led to a complete shutdown of my HPAA axis. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And when that happens, because basically prednisone is a what they call a corticosteroid, it's basically mimicking cortisol in your body to suppress your immune system. And I was on it because of my ulcerative colitis. When my HPA axis shut down, my joints started swelling up, my glands swelled up. I pretty much felt like I had a hangover all the time because my body couldn't hold on to water. I would constantly drink water, and I was constantly dehydrated. So these things can play a big enough role in our lives that if one thing shuts down, it can cause a negative cascade that can send our entire bodies into hurt. I also just did a podcast, episode number 40 of the Word Soul podcast, which I'll link below, with Dr. Mark Gordon. And he's looking at hormones as they relate to post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. And what he's found is that certain levels of inflammation in the body can actually get into the brain. And when they do, they shut down neurosteroid production, right? Because a good amount of the hormones that help us to function, including precursors to testosterone and human growth hormone, when inflammation gets up in there, it basically shuts that process down, and that can send us into a whole host of really bad states. So veterans who've been exposed to blasts and things that shook their brains enough to create that type of inflammation, or from other external sources of inflammation, they get into depression. They get into these post-traumatic stress-like symptoms. And so he's been looking at healing these veterans through hormonal replenishment. So these things are extremely important. To address this, I'm going to address the dairy specifically, but I also want to address every other thing that can hurt you out there, because it's not just the dairy that can cause hormonal shutdown or disruption in your testosterone production. There's a whole host of things out there that can interrupt your hormonal health. But with dairy specifically, and this is a big thing, factory raised dairy can definitely cause hormonal disruption. And it's not necessarily just because the cows are kept pregnant all the time. It's because they're also injected with hormones. They're injected with human growth hormone, they're injected with estrogens, and these can actually leak into our systems when we ingest them. And this can cause some serious disruption, not only for men, but for women. Women, this is a really big deal, because exogenous estrogens can actually throw them into what's called estrogen dominance. And that's when there's an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone. Progesterone balances with estrogen. Estrogen makes you feel more stressed, causes mood swings, things like that. It also causes cellular growth. Progesterone is more calming, and it shuts down cellular growth. So when these two things are out of balance, the big danger here is, one, weight gain. Women can get serious weight gain when they're in estrogen dominance. The other thing is, general mood and depression. But the most dangerous thing here is cancer, because of the cellular growth is going on unchecked. There's a serious risk of things like breast cancer, Also, uterine fibroids and dense and fibrous breasts can also be a major issue there. So with dairy, there's definitely that danger, but there's also some other serious dangers here that I want to mention too. Other sources of hormonal imbalance. Leading back to what you mentioned about fermentation, digestion can also be a serious cause of hormonal imbalance. And that's because, like I said, your brain plays a big role in hormonal production, but you actually have two brains. And this is something that said you have a brain up here and you have a brain in your intestinal tract, in your gut. And the brain is connected to your intestinal tract via something called the vagus nerve, VAGUS. I mentioned this in yesterday's video. But when there is inflammation in the intestinal tract, then that can also cause inflammation in the brain, and that could cause that same hormonal shutdown that we mentioned due to a non-neuropermissive environment for hormonal production. So back to the fermented foods thing, it's actually very important that you include probiotics and fermented foods in your diet. And it doesn't have to be dairy. You could do things like kombucha. You could do non-dairy kefir. There's coconut kefir, kefir soda. You can do kimchi. You can do raw sauerkraut. All of these things are good sources of probiotics that you could eat. And then the other thing is you also need to include a lot of vegetables in your diet, green, leafy, fibrous vegetables, to provide a good environment in your gut for the bacteria to grow and to increase your intestinal motility. And then, beyond that, making sure the foods that you do eat are digestible. If you've got different intolerances like a gluten intolerance, or if you've got a lactose intolerance, you definitely want to avoid those. You want to make sure that if you're eating vegetables that contain lectins, these tend to be the nightshade vegetables like eggplants and tomatoes and onions and peppers, then you want to make sure that you're not eating them often, and that they are cooked in a way that's going to reduce the presence of lectins. Me personally, I try to avoid nightshade vegetables because they can lead to serious amounts of gut inflammation, and for me that's a source of my ulcerative colitis. But these are all things that can cause that inflammation in the gut that can affect your hormonal production. Beyond digestion, we also want to really think about things that have happened to our brains in the past. Maybe we've gotten knocked out. Maybe we served in the military and we were next to, explosions, or we were next to small arms fire regularly, or we were in situations where our brain got vibrated, or maybe you had an accident and fell on your head, or got in a car accident. All these things can create that same type of inflammation that will shut down your brain. And when this happens, it's really important that we're getting micronutrients that'll help to shut that inflammation down. One of the things that Dr. Gordon mentioned this morning was a product called N-acetylcysteine. And this is a precursor to glutathione, which helps with cellular turnover and can shut inflammation down throughout the body. Another thing that Dr. Gordon mentioned was because brain inflammation can also shut down growth hormone production. This is something called dinotropin, and this is a liposomal product, meaning it absorbs underneath the tongue, and it's a secretagogue. So basically what this does, when you spray it in your mouth before you go to sleep, it helps your natural production of human growth hormone. And I like this product a lot, and full disclosure, we sell it on the Warrior Soul Goji website. I'll put a link for it below. But I wouldn't sell it if it didn't work. There's over 900 cases of clinical research behind this product, and it's been demonstrated to raise levels of IGF-1 and IGF-BP3. That's insulin-like growth factor, which comes from growth hormone production, by 50% to 200% in the clinical cases studied. And amazing product, makes me feel amazing. But beyond that, you also want to make sure that you're getting things like tocopherols from vitamin E. You know, make sure that you are getting enough omega-3s in your diet. I take a lot of fish oil every day, about 5,000 milligrams, because I have high levels of inflammation. You know, omega-3 fish oil, if you're a vegan, you can go with algae. From talking to various doctors who are experts in neurogenesis and neurological health, they said that algae is one of the only sources of vegan omega-3 that can actually absorb in the body properly. So those are other things you can do. Other things you want to avoid, petrochemicals in our household products. You want to really look at the hygiene products that you're using and the cleaning products you're using. You want to make sure that if there's petrochemicals in them, you're not using them. I tend to use natural shampoo. I use a natural deodorant that's made out of fat. I use natural soaps. I use the Dr. Bronner soap. I won't keep the other types of products in my household. Similarly, plastic bottles. You don't want to be drinking out of plastic bottles because those petrochemicals can actually get into our water, and these petrochemicals can actually mimic estrogen in the body, and again, that's super important for women, for females who are trying to avoid breast cancer. I use glass bottles, and for my water, I use this Hydro Flask here. My girlfriend got it for me for Christmas, and it contains a lot of water in there. It keeps my water cold. Amazing product. But just avoid plastics as much as you can. Other things that can seriously get to you is xenoestrogens in the pesticides that they use on vegetables. This is one reason why I eat organic vegetables. I'm part of a farm co-op over here. I get my vegetables delivered to my house every week, and you know, the fruits and vegetables, really important that you're getting from farms that don't use those types of pesticides. And then beyond that, other things I'm trying to think here. Oh, testosterone replacement therapy or hormone replacement therapy. If you're using things like testosterone or abusing things like testosterone, you really are putting yourself in danger of a hormonal shutdown and for low testosterone down the line. Similarly, if you're using something like recombinant human growth hormone, that can shut down your natural growth hormone production. A lot of people think it can't, but it definitely can. And that's one reason why Dr. Gordon produced this in the first place, was because he was getting a lot of bodybuilders in his office who had their growth hormone completely shut down. And if one of these hormones gets shut down, it can create a negative cascade that can shut all of them down. And I think that's about it. If I'm missing something, I will get back to you on it, but I think that's about it there. So these are all things that you should, practices you should include in your life, and things you should avoid to ensure proper hormonal balance. Again, hormones are a lot more than just sex or just getting swollen jacked. If your hormones are out of balance, they can seriously throw a wrench into your life. I'm talking about depression, I'm talking about suicidal tendencies, I'm talking about lack of energy, and just a lower quality of life. So you want to really do everything you can to ensure hormonal balance naturally, so that you don't ever have to go to something like TRT or HRT, or you know, abusing steroids or anything like that. And the more you're able to include these types of practices in your life, the healthier you'll be, and the more you'll be able to dominate life. So that's all I got, guys. Sorry that was a long ass video, but I hope it was informative. I'll talk to y'all soon. Love y'all.